Hello and welcome. I just finished recording a video about why I left the UK and I thought, you know what? The camera is on, I have makeup on, I might as well go through the books I read in the past 3 months. Because, as some of you may know, I am really bad at finding time to record these videos and I'm on a roll, so let's get this going. We are starting with an arc I got, which I was very excited that I got because it's from Schwab. I ended up reading, I think, half of it as an ARC version and then the other half when it came out as a physical copy, right? So it is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, okay? This book basically has toxic lesbian vampires. That's all you need to know, honestly. I was a bit confused as to how to rate this book because plot-wise, I wouldn't say it was anything that special, but, you know, V. Schwab has a great writing style. I love her prose. This book was haunting in a very emotional type of way because we follow 3 vampire ladies basically and their story of how they become vampires and how they develop as vampires and also how their lives intertwine with each other's. This is most definitely a character-driven story. It is not a plot-driven story. It was very bittersweet and weirdly nostalgic, but I also couldn't really connect to one of the characters specifically. I found reading her chapters a little bit annoying, and I think it was it Alice? Yes, it was Alice's story that I didn't really care about that much. As a character, Sabine really stole the show, and I could honestly read a whole book just for Sabine. Okay, so Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil gets a 4 out of 5. Then I read another arc, again by another great author, Kingfisher, called Swordheart. What can I tell you about that book? I am going to buy a physical copy because I think I will be buying physical copies of all of Kingfisher's books that I like. But this is basically the story about a dude in a sword that's horny. That's the sum of it. It is set in the same world as Clockwork Boys. It's not in the same time frame, but it is the same world, and it felt so nice being back in that world. It's unique and compelling and fun, and Kingfisher's writing style is very engaging. She writes great dialogues. And yeah, that was my first introduction to the Temple of the White Rat, which I'm absolutely in love with. And if I were a Kingfisher character, I will be part of the temple. Just so you understand better, the Temple of the White Rat is basically the temple of lawyers. Compared to the other Kingfisher books I read, it's not as good, so I am giving it a 3 out of 5. And now we have a book that joined the pile of shame. If you don't know what the pile of shame is, it's a pile of books I read that I believe deserve to be shamed till the end of this world because they're bad, okay? To me, they are very bad. Now, give me a second. Phantasma. This is completely on me. This is completely my fault. I have to stop picking books based on fan art. This is a story of a necromancer girl who is not really a necromancer, but anyway, that joins some challenges because she thinks that her sister went in to do those challenges, and she wants to get her sister out. And the place they go to for those challenges is kind of like hell, if I remember correctly. Yeah, because there are demons and devils. She falls in love with one of those demons / devils or whatever. I did DNF it. I DNF'd it right around, I don't know, maybe it wasn't halfway, but like, did I get to this part? Gluttony? I don't know. I DNF'd it at one point. I just couldn't. Okay, the writing style is not consistent at all, right? At the beginning I had hopes because it felt good. The writing style felt good. But then suddenly we started dropping below Wattpad fanfiction level. How did this drop happen? Why did it happen? I don't know. but it happened. And the main characters don't really have set personalities, and reading this honestly felt like I was 14 again and scrolling through Tumblr at 3 a.m. and looking at my notes, because I'm trying to delete this from my brain. Looking for my notes, my question, no, not a question, but one of my comments is that I still can't wrap my head around how Ophelia, the main character, is just being Dora the Explorer and no one bats an eye. Because she's looking for her sister and then she's just going around this very dangerous place with the demons and devils and whatever, and no one says anything. She just kind of goes and snoops around and no one does anything, says anything. How? Why? Oh yes, another one! How many times do we need to hear about Ophelia wanting to stick her tongue out at people? I would argue that Ophelia was actually 14 in this book, but based on the smut, no. DNF. Never again. Next up, we are going into controversial territory with Babel. So this is a story about a special institute in Oxford where they teach translating. And the reason why it's so special is because in the magical world of this book, translating is actually what triggers magic to happen. Translating and writing those translations on silver. And it's supposed to be very complicated, and because the translators are supposed to have a certain connection to to the languages that they're translating, our main characters are not British. They are from different cultures. And also because they are from different cultures, and this takes place in the 19th century, there is a lot of prejudice against them and, outright racism, as well as outright sexism, because you also have women who are generally not really accepted into the academical world. So I am going to first start with saying that the writing is very smooth and consistent. Okay, the writing style I did enjoy a lot. It also made me feel weirdly nostalgic about the UK, and it kind of hit a special spot. I also love footnotes, okay? Books with footnotes, love them. Now I can definitely see why there is an emphasis on racism in this book, especially because it is told from Ramsay's perspective, who is an example of the other. Right? So we see the world through his eyes, and he is quite often the subject of racism. But here's the thing, the main four characters didn't really have a personality apart from being foreigners. So they kind of just did whatever fit the direction the author wanted to take the story. And a lot of the things they said and did were questionable. Wait, the dude's name was Rami, not Ramsay. Did I say Ramsay or Rami? What was your name? Sorry, it's been a while. Robin? Then why did they write Rami? What? I'm so confused. Who's Rami? Wait, what? Where did that come from in my notes? Okay. Sorry. Confused Rami and Robin. Yeah, so we follow Robin. Apologies. Anyway, I do have a bone to pick with the world building, because you're telling me that in a world where magic exists, and they know that magic exists, and it's part of how the world works with machines and whatever. So you're telling me that somehow our world has developed at exactly the same speed and has done almost exactly the same things, and historically we have followed exactly the same things as our current real world has. Like, the magic itself hasn't really had that big of an effect, even though it's described in the book as it has like a humongous effect. That doesn't make sense to me. Now I'm very conflicted about how to rate this book, because I like the writing style. I appreciate the research that went into writing this book. But by gods, It is so boring. It started off well, it really did. But by page 200, we were still doing the same thing. And there is only so much language theory I can take. It honestly felt like the author couldn't decide if she wanted this to be a book specifically on language theory or if she wanted this to be a fictional book. The balance was way off. Okay, now spoilers, okay? I will put a timestamp where the spoilers end. Are we clear? Okay, spoilers. I am sorry, okay, but you cannot in any way convince me that Letty betrayed them because she was white. She betrayed them because they were really shitty friends towards her. Like, they were being really shitty. And I read over those parts over and over again. But they were just shit people to be friends with. Also, you're telling me I read 540 pages just for the big bad to be defeated with a strike. Excuse me? 2 out of 5. Next up, we have a book that was surprisingly fun to read, and that is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brando Sando. Imagine that our world was so technologically developed that we could travel through dimensions, or we could create new dimensions, and you can buy those dimensions for yourself, and you can go there and rule the world. Let's say it that way. And you have a marketing team that deals with selling those dimensions to people. You have a whole corporation with legal teams and scientists that develop those dimensions and whatnot. And so we have a man that wakes up in the middle of nowhere with no memories of what has happened and who he is. And he's somehow in medieval England. And then he has to figure out what's happening. And if possible, how to get back. That's it. That is the premise of this book. I really did not expect Brando to write something like this and to be that entertaining. It was very fun to read. It was chill. It kind of gave me Discworld vibes a little bit, which was great. So yeah, The Frugal Wizard gets a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have another arc, which is Silvercloak. Now, I really tried with this book, okay? I tried for months. I kept opening up and reading it, closing it, opening and reading it, closing it. And I think this is a case where I can really say it's not you, it's me, because I really couldn't click with it. The writing style was okay. The plot, the premise of the plot sounded interesting. Basically, you have a girl who is finishing, let's say, police school, and she's going to infiltrate the mafia because they killed her parents. And because there's magic in this world, but for some reason magic does not affect her. Like, she can use magic, but if someone uses magic on her, it does not affect her. And she tries very hard to keep that a secret, but then they find out at the final exam. And so the police decide that she is the best person to send to infiltrate the mafia. And then, of course, there's a love interest, which is the dude from the mafia. One of the dudes from the mafia. The unique thing here about the magical system is that it's powered by very strong emotions, so either pleasure or pain. Now, I think the main issues I had with this book is that the story dragged a lot. There was a lot of telling, not showing, and lots of over-descriptions. I mean, not lots and lots, but there were plenty of over-descriptions, and I just couldn't get into the story. I kept wanting to skip, which is never a good sign. And as I said, yes, there is a unique aspect to the magical system, but at the end of the day, they still use wands, and they still cast spells, and my head just kept going, Harry Potter, Harry Potter, Harry Potter, which is why I say it's not you, it's me. I couldn't get that out of my head. So yeah, thank you NetGalley for the arc, but I DNF'd this one. Now we have another Kingfisher book, what a surprise. We have Hemlock and Silver, which I think I also, did I read it as an arc as well? And then buy the copy? I think I did. Indeed, I did read this as an arc and then bought a copy. This is a retelling of Snow White, but in a very Kingfisher style. It is kind of horror-ish. And there is also some romantasy to it, but it's not that big of a plot point. Now, definitely, you should not expect it to follow the blueprint of Snow White. This is a very unique retelling. So our main character is actually, let's say, a poison master. She is a scientist and she tries to find antidotes for poisons. And it's so refreshing to read the characters that Kingfisher creates, because they are not your typical extremely beautiful, so strong, so intelligent, all amazing women. They're actual just normal human beings with their flaws and their quirkiness. And it's just so refreshing, Because I feel like the market is so oversaturated with these amazing women, when you can be an amazing woman without being Superwoman, So for most of the book, I was thinking of giving it 3 stars, because, it's your typical solid Kingfisher book with good storytelling, good plot, good characters. But it wasn't up there with some of her other books, right? But then in the last 100 pages, I definitely decided this is a 4-star read. And I will be honest, its horror elements were not that intense, but for a few days, I was kind of side-eyeing the mirrors in the house, because some visuals from the book just kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I just continue to be impressed by Kingfisher's range. Yeah, so 4 out of 5. Now we have one of the classics of vampire stories, Carmilla. So Carmilla is one of the earliest known works of vampire literature. It predates Dracula. So it's about sapphic vampires-ish. It's hauntingly beautiful. Like, the prose really is outstanding. And it was a really quick and easy book to read. I don't think there's much more to say about this book. I do think that if you are a fan of horror literature and a fan of vampires, then you should read this. And Carmilla gets a 4 out of 5. Now we're going back to Kingfisher territory with another arc, Snake Eater. Now this is a cozy horror story. I have to say, this book for me solidifies that Kingfisher is an absolute master of characterization. The characters in this book were so vivid, with such strong personalities. Like, I can still picture them in my head and what they would say and how they would react to things. That's how well built they were. It's a story about a woman that's basically running away from her boyfriend because she's in a very toxic relationship. And she has no one left, really. Her mom has passed away, and she goes and seeks out her aunt that lives in the middle of nowhere, in the desert. But then she gets there, and unfortunately her aunt has passed away as well. Now, the people in that little village are very kind to her, and she moves into her aunt's house. And the community there helps her settle down. There are, as I said, some horror elements, magical elements to the story, because you have spirits that live in the desert. And our main character kind of starts getting abused by a certain spirit. The story follows her development as a person outside of her toxic relationship, kind of battling through her constant anxiety. And it also shows how she overcomes this huge obstacle that this basically spiritual bully is putting in her way, and is trying to, put a stop to her comfortable life and kill her. I think he basically just wants to kill her, honestly. Anyway, it's a story about her growing up even more as a person and overcoming these obstacles. With all of that said, it did drag a little bit, and it kind of lost its momentum towards the end. And while, yes, it is very well written and I love the characters, it, once again, is not one of Kingfisher's best books, and it does get a 3 out of 5. And now we have Kingfisher again. With Nettle and Bone. I would put this into the cozy horror category again, but, okay, not because it's cozy as in themes and characters, but because it feels like, I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's not a book that's going to really put a lot on you, so you can just kind of snuggle up and read it, but it does take you into this creepy world with very vivid descriptions of some horror-y stuff. The imagery is not really cozy, but it reads as a cozy book, okay? The prose is stunning. The prose is beautiful. I would say this is one of Kingfisher's best books when it comes to prose. It has an interesting story with lovable and well-built characters, apart from the main love interest dude, because he did kind of feel like he was a blank slate that you could just insert any personality into and it would fit and be okay. But again, this is a story where the romance is more of a subplot, so it's okay, I accept that. See, this is why I keep saying that when I really like a book, I don't really explain what it's about, and I struggle to explain what it's about. Okay, so our main girl wants to save her sister who has been sent to marry a prince, but that prince and the king, they're tyrants, right? And she wants to save her sister from them. She goes on a quest, and she's told that she has to complete these challenges, and then she will be given the weapon to kill the prince. On her quest, Mara is joined by the Grave Witch, a reluctant fairy godmother, a strapping former knight, and a chicken possessed by a demon. So Nettle and Bone gets a 5 out of 5. Here we have another book that should probably go into the shame pile, but it is part of a series, and I don't think the series as a whole deserves to go into the shame pile, so it's staying where it is. Accomplice to the Villain, which is the 3rd book in the series, and I thought that this was going to be the last. And I kept reading it and hoping that it would be the last. But alas, it is not. There will be a 4th book. This just gets cringier and cringier the more you read it. It does not get better, but it was still a chill read. I mean, it wasn't... As much as cringe can be chill, this was a chill read, and that it was just non-engaging, right? You zero thoughts, head empty. Just words on a page, kind of like watching a show in the background while you do stuff. Although in this case you have to be reading the pages, but it was just like, eh. It really feels like the author had ideas for specific scenes, but no ideas for a coherent plot. And what's weird is that the more characters were added to this story, the more they read like the same people. And I just don't get it, how this series keeps getting worse and worse. It's just so repetitive. The vocabulary, the scenes, the emotional drama, the jokes, the 5,000 twists, they are all the same. You know what's the biggest problem of this book, I think? It's that there are no ups and downs. It's just, how many? 350 pages of things happening over and over again. And instead of it being exciting, it just becomes boring. Because at the end of the day, it's all the same and there really is nothing for you to expect. Now, will I read the 4th book? Yes. Yes, I will. Because I have already committed and I still have some hope. Because I rated the 1st book 4 stars. Okay? Please. Please, I have hope. At least let the last one not be a 1 star. Please. Anyway, Accomplice to the Villain gets 1 out of 5. You know how for Phantasma I said that I should stop picking books based on the fan art? Well, here we are again with Smoke and Scar. To be honest though, this is not completely my fault, okay? Because my boyfriend saw the fan art and he got really excited. And he wanted us to buy it, so he can read it. Well, I read it. He hasn't yet. He might not. But I don't blame myself fully for falling into this trap, okay? Also, this is not as bad as Phantasma. Not at all. Now, this is a story about a female fae warrior that also goes into some challenges because not her sister, but her ex's sister, who's dead, goes into those trials and she wants to save her, or just at least make sure she survives. And she goes in there and she basically falls in love with a human knight thingy, which is so taboo because apparently humans and fairies hate each other, right? And that is basically the premise of this story. This has probably the most unimaginative names I have ever encountered in a book, and they're so unimaginative that I'm completely sure that the author is taking the piss. Example, Lord Leviathan Church. I shall repeat myself. Lord Leviathan Church. It is a bit slow. The story drags quite a lot with certain scenes. Like, some of the trials could definitely have been shorter, but in general the prose is not bad. The dwarves were a delight, as always. Dwarves are always delightful to read. Now, the love development, the love plot. They did not fall in love with each other because of who they are as people, but because of basically destiny just pulling them together, which I'm not really a fan of as a concept. The final plot twist was incredibly predictable, and I will be fully honest, I did skim read the last 150 pages. And I will not be reading the second book. But Smoke and Scar does get a 3 out of 5. This is its own separate rating, okay? It's not the rating I use for Kingfisher, because I rate Kingfisher based on Kingfisher. This is just a basic romantasy rating. Could have been worse. Could have been better. It's okay. Now this is embarrassing. Bride. I will throw my boyfriend under the bus again. He bought it for himself, because he's a fan of vampires and werewolves, okay? So, this is how this ended up in my house. Okay, boyfriend bought it for himself. I read it before he did. He's reading it now. Okay, here's the thing. Boyfriend went back to his hometown for the weekend. And apparently, I end up losing my mind when he's gone. Apparently. So I read this in like a day. This is a story of a vampire that is basically forced to marry a werewolf to keep peace between the two species. That's the plot, really, that is it. This is really highly embarrassing, okay? It's extremely cringy, but I gobbled it up. I really did. It reads like a good fan fiction, and it did the job that good fan fictions do. Now, the smut was too much, okay? And one bit specifically was very questionable, to say the least. It was very questionable. I'm pretty sure that you can guess which bit that was. And I will be reading the second book. And this is what, you know what is the questionable thing that makes this so flippin' embarrassing? But I am giving this book an embarrassing 4 out of 5. And now we're moving on. Again, in that weekend that my boyfriend was gone, I read an arc called A Kingdom of Shadow and Ash, which is another book where you have a forced marriage. And it's again between different magical races. The girl is kind of like demon-ish with horns and stuff, and the man was kind of... what was he like? I can barely remember. But he was kind of supposed to be the opposite. But also the girl is kind of like a warrior and extremely strong and beautiful and perfect and smart and all of that, you know, perfect female characters in romantasies. Nothing really special about this book. I think it had potential, I really do. The prose isn't bad at all, it's actually quite smooth, which already kind of puts it ahead of other romantasy books, or at least most romantasy books. And you can definitely tell that the author had a vision, and the world is big and carefully crafted. But, okay, there is a big but. The balance between the world building and the character building is really off, okay? Like, really off. We spent so much time on the world building and lore dumps, and we are supposed to learn about characters from different places through that, but we just end up being bombarded with like world history instead of actually developing any relationships with the characters. Also, we are supposed to be focusing on the main girl and the main dude's plot lines, but because the main girl goes to that kingdom with her siblings. We also get the siblings plot lines and another romance plot line. And that other romance plot line ended up being more interesting than the main couple's romance plot line. So we're just kind of really split into different directions, which also did not help with, character building. And here's the thing, again, how and why are we falling in love within a week? Like madly, deeply in love within a week. And also throughout the whole story, we are supposed to be worrying about a potential war that it might happen with species that is supposed to be extinct, but it's not, and that species kind of tied with our main character because she's very special, but no one really knows how exactly she is so special and why she's so special, and then she ends up just being like extremely OP. Female empowerment does not mean perfection. Okay, can we please start getting that right? Because I'm sick and tired of reading these extremely unrealistic characters, and that just really takes me out of the story. Okay, when I see a character like that with no flaws and that can't be beaten at any cost, why am I even reading this? What am I looking out for? What character development am I expecting? What plot development am I looking out for? There's nothing. And so this book, for me, tried to do too many things at once, and it all just kind of became a mess. I did read all of it, but I will not be reading the second book. And this one also gets a 3 out of 5. So again, on that weekend when my boyfriend was away, I went overboard and read 2 more books. Vow Forever Night and Until the End of Ever. It's a duology. Okay. And once again, yes, I never learned from my mistakes. I picked the first one up because of the fan art. Yes. But this time, I am not disappointed. So, basically, this is a story about... Oh no, okay. Goodreads, help me please. So our main dude, he's like a dark sorcerer. And his power is kind of like sucking other people's powers away. And also a whole lot of different magical stuff, and he brews potions, and he's also extremely rich. Excuse me. While our girl is a healer, basically. And she does light magic. So they're kind of like the complete opposites. They're kind of forced to work together on a case. Because he is punished and he's sent to do like community service, and they basically send him to work for the police in the city where she lives. And his partner is her cousin. That's how they just kind of start talking. And then a case shows up, and it turns out that she's kind of tied to that case and she needs help. And then he helps her because he seems to be the best person to help, because he's very much overpowered. And he has a lot of money and connections, yes, that's how it goes. But the world itself is pretty much tied to Greek mythology. So you have gods and powers and creatures, and you have... I think it was the upper world and the lower world, or underworld, something like that. It was honestly a quite interesting world. I liked the setup. I liked the writing style because it was not dry. I laughed out loud a few times. The dialogues were quick and snarky and funny. The banter was great. And here's the main selling point for me. This series is so Hermione coded. It is so Hermione coded. It could have been a Hermione fanfiction, honestly. I had a great time with it. Okay? Now, Vow Forever Night, the first book, gets a 4 out of 5. And Until the End of Ever, the second book, gets a 3 out of 5. Good job. Anyway, moving on. Can you guess what we're moving on to? Do you have any clue? Okay, I'm gonna give you 3 seconds to guess what we're moving on to. Okay, we're going past 3 seconds because they're hard to reach. If you guessed Kingfisher again, you're right. We have Paladin's Grace. So this is the first book in the Saint of Steel series. They're all set in the Wonder Engine, Clock Tower war world. So it's all very exciting, at least to me, right? All very exciting. They are kind of close to the same time period, but not exactly. Like they're a little bit after, maybe not a little bit, maybe 20 years after, I don't know, around that time. So you have the Saint of Steel, and he has paladins. But what happens is that the Saint of Steel dies, which is quite unheard of. Now, his paladins are berserkers, and the Saint of Steel used to guide them into battle and point them in a direction so they could kill, and he would point them away from the innocents so they wouldn't harm them when they were berserk. But now that he is gone, the paladins are pretty dangerous. And when the god dies, most of his paladins die as well, or they go like really berserk and start killing people around them, and then they have to be killed. And basically we have only 7 paladins remain, and they're taken in by the Temple of the Rat, where they live, and because they're so grateful, they serve the temple even though the rat does not take paladins. But now that their god is gone and there's no one to guide them through the berserker mode, when they call it a tide, when the tide hits, they become very dangerous and they have to be restrained or knocked out, basically. So they are like a ticking time bomb. So when Paladin's Grace, our main dude, is one of those paladins. The lady, the love interest, she is a perfumer. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it in English, but basically she makes perfumes. And this is pretty much the story of how they get together. There is also a plot that kind of runs through the first and second book, and then another one that runs through all the rest of the books. In the first and the second book, it's about creatures, I think kind of like golems, like they're made from clay, that attack people and behead them and then substitute their heads with clay heads, and then that body, is taken over by that clay head and then functions until it decomposes so much that it can't be used anymore, and so another body has to have his head chopped off, and you get the drill. So in the first and second book, they're trying to find out how that's happening, why it's happening, who's responsible, and how to stop. The underlying question for all of the books in the series so far is how and why did the Saint of Steel die? But yeah, this is very endearing, interesting to read, fun to read, cozy, with some creepy elements, typical for Kingfisher, with lovely writing style, and Paladin's Grace gets a 4 out of 5. Now in the second book, which I also read, Paladin's Strength, we have another one of the Berserk Paladins, and a nun that does something very fun, which I'm not going to spoil because it's a nice surprise. It's a bit predictable, but it is a nice surprise. And again, it is their love story, and it's also the story of the nun trying to save her sisters who have been kidnapped. And again, as I said, there's the 2 underlying plot points of how and why did the saint die, and who the hell are those claymen, and why are they doing what they're doing. Not as good as Paladin's Grace. So this gets a 3 out of 5. I am not reading the third book in the series, which is Paladin's Hope. I am not reading Paladin's Hope because these 3, no, the first one I ordered online and it was the only one available online in Bulgaria. The second 2 I found in the same bookstore, so I had to buy them immediately. I mean, the second and the fourth one. The third one I haven't been able to find. It's in the back burner for now. You can kind of read them separately. But those 2 underlying plot lines, you're gonna miss stuff there. So I don't really recommend reading them separately. I did kind of have a skim read online to see what I've missed from Paladin's Hope. So all's good. See, I'm split between ending it here because those are the books I read in August, September, and October. And now it's 5th of November.
Remember the 5th of November.
But yesterday I finished Paladin's Strength, and I am talking about it anyway, so I might as well talk about it. Anyway, no, not Paladin's Strength, Paladin's Faith, the last one. Okay, Paladin's Faith. Again, Saint of Steel, Paladin dude, and the lady spy from the first book in Paladin's Grace. She was a friend of the main girl in the first book, and then she disappeared, but now she's back, and we know she's a spy. So we have the Paladin who has to serve as her bodyguard on a mission, and her as the spy. And here we start getting another plot line, which I can't really disclose because it will be a spoiler, but it does also tie in with why did the god die and how. Now, this kind of dragged a little bit. I was really excited for it, but it did kind of drag. This is a love story that did not feel as fleshed out, and I couldn't really connect to it as much. But I really like Shane, the Paladin dude, as a character, and I really like how his character was developed towards the end. And that was very satisfying, honestly. But overall, again, in the series, it also gets a 3 out of 5. I assume that we are going to get more books in this series. Don't know when, but I am looking forward to them and I will read them. When was the 4th book published? 2023. Now it's 2025. Kingfisher, please give us the rest of the Paladin series. Thank you. Anyway, okay, now we're done. Now we are done. This is probably way too long. Again, you can definitely tell that these past few months I've only felt like reading relaxing, fun books in general. I was kind of stressed out, and because of work I don't really have enough time, so I wanted to read something relaxing and quick. Hence all of these books that I just went through. As always, any book recommendations are welcome. I do have a shelf on Goodreads where I record all of your recommendations, and I will get through them at some point. And as I always say, if you have read any of the books I've read, or if you're reading them now, if you have any reviews that you want to share, any thoughts and opinions, please feel free to do so. This is a safe space. We can discuss things like adults, please. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope I will upload this in November. Definitely before Christmas. It will definitely go up before Christmas. Enjoy the coming of winter, and I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.